He was the freedom fighter turned president, a man who stood at the center of South Africa's rebirth and its greatest scandals. But behind the headlines, Jacob Zuma wasn't just a political force. He was a husband to 6 women. Some say they loved him, others say they feared him. One tragically ended her life. Where are they now? How do they live today? And what are the secrets they've kept, or revealed, since walking away from one of Africa's most powerful and controversial men? To find out more, let's dive into Empire Elegance. Jacob Zuma ruled South Africa from 2009 to 2018, but even before that, he was no stranger to power. A former intelligence chief of the ANC, his name became synonymous with revolution, resistance, and later, scandal. But while the world focused on state capture, corruption, and politics, another story quietly unfolded. Inside his homes, behind palace walls, Zuma lived by a traditional Zulu code. He practiced polygamy. He married multiple women. But what happened after the weddings ended? Where did those women go? Why did some vanish without a word, while others found their voices years later? Let's uncover the emotional, political, and even dangerous lives of Jacob Zuma's wives and how they live today. The pain, the silence, and the shocking truths they're only now ready to share. Let's begin. She wasn't just Jacob Zuma's wife. She was his equal. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, a qualified medical doctor and a fierce anti-apartheid activist, married Zuma in 1982 while in exile. Together, they became one of South Africa's most formidable power couples. Their union, however, struggled under the weight of politics and ambition. The marriage produced 4 daughters, but it couldn't survive the friction behind closed doors. In 1998, Delini Zuma filed for divorce. She never publicly attacked her husband, but political insiders whispered of cold power dynamics and infidelity. Unlike most women who exit high-profile marriages, Nkosazana didn't fade away. She rose, taking on powerful cabinet positions, heading the African Union Commission, and even challenging her former husband in the ANC leadership race. Now in her 70s, she remains a force in South African politics. She is still a cabinet minister today, shaping policy, issuing public health guidelines, and refusing to be sidelined. She has rarely spoken of their marriage, and maybe she doesn't need to. Her legacy speaks louder than any scandal ever could. But not every story ends with power. Some end in silence and sorrow. Kate Manshow was Zuma's second wife, the first to bear him children, 5 in total. She was gentle, devout, and intensely private. Married in 1976, she stood by Zuma for 24 years, but behind her composed exterior, something was breaking. On a quiet December day in 2000, Kate took her own life. Her suicide note, heartbreakingly brief, said only this: 24 years of hell. There were hints of betrayal, of emotional abuse, but no investigation followed. At her funeral, Zuma looked shattered, but he has never publicly addressed the contents of her note. Their daughter, Thuthukile, later became one of the youngest government chiefs of staff. But her rise was met with outrage. Critics said it wasn't merit, but legacy that opened those doors. Kate's story is barely remembered in official narratives, yet those who knew her recall a woman who wanted peace, but found herself trapped in the eye of a political storm. She represents the hidden costs of marrying power, the costs paid in private, far from press briefings or red carpets. Today, her grave in Johannesburg is rarely visited by the press. But for those who remember her, it marks the silence of a woman never allowed to speak her truth. Then came a newer wife, one with grace, beauty, and education, but none of it could protect her from political games. Nompumelelo Ntuli, or Mantuli as she was known, joined Zuma's life in 2008. She was polished, well-spoken, and eager to support her husband's presidency. For a time, she played the perfect first lady. But in 2014, Zuma fell mysteriously ill. The blame placed squarely on Mantuli. She was accused, without trial, of poisoning him. There was no evidence, no case, just a swift removal from Nkandla. She was banished. Since then, Mantuli has fought quietly to be allowed back into her children's lives and clear her name. Whether she was falsely accused, politically targeted, or simply inconvenient, no one knows. In interviews, she has called her exile 5 years of hell. What's undeniable is that once suspicion was cast, there was no defense strong enough to restore her place. Today, she lives in Durban, away from cameras, refusing to speak at length. But her presence in court filings and social records tells a story of a woman not defeated, just deeply wounded. If Mantuli's story is one of exile, then Thobeka Madiba's is one of rebellion. A former banker and glamour figure, Thobeka married Zuma in 2010 in a lavish ceremony attended by heads of state. Young, stylish, and confident, she embodied the role of First Lady, at least in public. But behind the scenes, their marriage was unraveling. In 2020, she made headlines for dragging the former president into court over unpaid child support, over R500,000. In legal papers, she accused Zuma of treating her like a disposable prop, and her voice rang loud in South African society when she said, being Zuma's wife was not a privilege, it was a burden. Since then, Thobeka has stayed quiet, but she's been spotted occasionally at charity events, church gatherings, and private parties in KwaZulu-Natal. She may no longer wear the First Lady's crown, but her act of resistance lives on in court records and public memory. Then came the youngest chapter, and perhaps the most unexpected. Nonkanyiso Konko, known across South Africa as Lakonko, was Zuma's most recent public partner. Decades younger than him, she gave birth to their son in 2018. But unlike Zuma's earlier wives, she refused to remain in the shadows. She joined the cast of The Real Housewives of Durban, where she shared fragments of her emotional journey, never naming Zuma, but always alluding to the silence, the restrictions, and the toll. I was in love, she said, but I was kept in the shadows. Her strength lay in reclaiming her identity. Today, she's no longer just Zuma's ex. She's a TV personality, a businesswoman, and a mother writing her own future. She frequently posts about her faith, her son, and her evolving womanhood. And in doing so, she may have broken the oldest tradition of all, staying quiet. Yet one name remains shrouded in mystery: Suzakumalo, or Makumalo, Zuma's first wife, married in 1973. The woman who stood by him the longest and spoke the least. She had no children, rarely appeared in public. And during Zuma's presidency, she was First Lady in title only. Was that her choice, or a quiet exile of another kind? No one knows for sure. To this day, Makumalo has given no interviews, written no memoirs, and left behind no quotes. But she remains in Nkandla, the symbolic matriarch of a fractured political dynasty. The woman who saw it all and said nothing. Visitors to Nkandla sometimes catch a glimpse of her, watering flowers, greeting elders, disappearing behind carved wooden doors. She may be silent, but her presence whispers volumes. Together, these women bore Jacob Zuma more than 20 children. Some of those children have entered politics, others business. A few have avoided the spotlight altogether. Delini Zuma, the most prominent, has announced political ambitions, claiming he wants to run for president someday. But growing up with Jacob Zuma as a father was never simple. They've lived between privilege and scrutiny, their futures, tangled in the choices their father made, and the quiet endurance of the women who raised them. 6 women, 6 different paths. Some left in silence, others in scandal, one in unimaginable sorrow. But each reveals something vital, that behind every powerful man, there may be a line of women who bore the cost of his ambition, and that even in palaces, love can turn to fear. As South Africa continues to reckon with Zuma's political legacy, perhaps it is time to reckon with his personal one too. Because the women who lived behind those gates, they remember everything. Some still defend him, others have broken their silence, but all of them reveal one undeniable truth. Behind the walls of South Africa's presidential estates, Not everything was as it seemed. What do you think? Were they victims, survivors, or silent enablers? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Empire Elegance and hit the notification bell for more powerful stories about the lives and legacies of the world's most influential figures. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.